Our guest today on the Spiritual Scientist podcast is Andrew Linnell, and Andrew is an author, speaker, lecturer, and the founder of MysTech, which is an organization which does research into moral human-machine interaction and is very involved in technology. And so we're very happy to welcome you to the podcast again, Andrew. Great to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here again. I admire the work you do, Mick, and I want to support such efforts. So I'm happy to be here, and over to you. Let's get this rolling.
Okay, let's get it rolling. Yeah, a couple of technical difficulties, but we're here now. So we thought what our theme could be today, because there's actually a conference coming up that Andrew is involved in organizing through MysTech, and it's the conference. The theme for the conference is facing the incarnation of Ahriman, and so this is a very big theme and a difficult theme, really, in anthroposophy. And maybe what I thought was we could start with a couple of questions, because this idea of this force or this being that is referred to in anthroposophical terms as Ahriman is, in a sense, one type of being with a particular role in human evolution, and that role could be connected or can be connected with the mysteries of evil, we could say. And so this is, a topic which you have to be a little bit careful with, of course, and speak about tentatively. But I think it's also important that we face it today, and that's, by the sound of it, what you're doing with this conference.
Right.
And so, yeah, maybe a place to start is just to ask you about what is it that we're talking about here, Andrew, when we get into this topic.
Yeah, most of us who are in your audience are familiar with the concept of Satan. Probably a good large majority of your audience was raised Christian, and in Christianity, both Satan and Lucifer exist, but typically they've been merged. And Rudolf Steiner pointed out that they are actually different beings. And in Goethe's Faust, they're still sort of merged, but this Mephistopheles character in Goethe's Faust is more this Ahriman being. And Ahriman, to distinguish between Lucifer, which means the light bearer, Ahriman, you might say, is the darkness bearer. And they each have important roles in our human evolution. So if we accept the idea that is presented in Genesis of some spiritual place called Eden, and human beings were present there, that a being, Lucifer, was allowed into this garden. And well, duh, what do you think's going to happen? And he gets us humans to eat of the tree of the life, eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this creates a karmic consequence, the original sin that we as human beings had to go through a different set of evolutionary stages than had normally been intended by the Elohim. And so we fell deeper into earth and into matter, which we might call, in anthroposophy, we know that, and we also now know in quantum physics, that matter is a kind of illusion. It doesn't really exist the way we perceive it. Our perceptions tell us one thing, but when we look further and further into it, matter disappears. So the being that brings about this illusion of matter is this being Ahriman. And as we know, matter has no light in it. We need light in order to see the world we're in. and the sun provides this light for us. So we have Lucifer, we have Ahriman, and we have the sun illuminating. And in ancient times, the being of the sun was known to be the being that John's gospel calls the Logos, the being that was destined to come to earth to change our evolution from its downward path to be able to have an upward path. And so on the way down, Lucifer had an incarnation. Then we had Christ sort of at the bottom. And now, sort of at the same level that Lucifer had, we'll have an incarnation of this other being, Ahriman. And these three form a kind of trinity. And we have those three within each of us. So this conference is, we've done Lucifer's incarnation, we've done Christ's incarnation. This conference is now about how do we face Ahriman's incarnation? How can we make it into something that is helpful and even healthy for human evolution? So that's a lot to
Yeah,
try to take in. But
there's a lot there, but that's great. And I think something you mentioned in there, that to see these forces and these beings as a necessary part of evolution is something that I think in traditional forms of Christianity may be a little difficult to get, or I think maybe the early church fathers understood it, but people in the modern age less so. That we just tend to think of evil as just this bad thing. It's of course it's bad, but it's bad. You've just got to get rid of it and be good, 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 good. You know, be as good as you can and all that sort of stuff. But it's more complicated than that. And as you say, these forces, these beings exist within us as well as within the world, and but that they have a role. So yeah, maybe you could say a little bit more about the role that they have or the task that they have.
yeah, well, very good. In a way, we can say, well, I'm going to go to even Darwinian evolution for a moment. There were Neanderthals, and then the modern Homo sapiens came about, and the actual structure of the brain was different. And but we also know that the earliest humans, well, I don't know if we can say we know from anthroposophy that the earliest humans really could not yet fully think. They couldn't be conscious that they were a thing in themselves. They felt themselves in a group way. And this would be similar to how animals behave today. And I don't want to say the domesticated animals. There's a kind of groupness to an animal, a herdness. And you can see things when birds are flying, how the whole flock kind of makes a form, and yet they can separate into individual birds sitting on a nest over their eggs. So humans, we can talk about an evolution of consciousness, and we can really attribute most of this to Lucifer, to bringing about a self-awareness. In fact, this ability to say I to ourselves comes from this being Lucifer. And that's partly what he did incorrectly in Eden, was to give us knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of good and evil. And out of that, we have developed the ability to say, I am. But there's a true I am, just as Lucifer is the bearer of light, but not the light. There is a being that is the light, but is also, you might say, the I am in a higher sense of the human being. And the higher sense meaning that I am encompasses all of humanity. And that requires a new kind of love. There is to help us develop this love, there is a being that his role, and this is Ahriman, is to oppose this love so that this love becomes something strong. It opposes or it takes advantage of the freedom and turns it into, um, sort of gross egotism that I want this for myself. If you get there, that's fine. But all I care about in this world and this life is me. And that would be sort of Ahriman speaking out of the materialistic realm. So uh, this Ahriman has this role to help us as we progress on this upward path to develop strength in our wisdom, strength in our love, and not just be able to say, oh, all you need is love. Um, but in fact, to realize that love without wisdom can be dangerous to the recipient, that we need a certain strength in that bringing forth love in the right way to human beings. So we like to whitewash it and just say, oh, all you need is love. But yeah, and so Ahriman also wants to take materialism and have us believe that we are just machines, that our brains, our thinking is no different than what artificial intelligence is doing. It's just a biological computer. And many people ascribe to that and think we are nothing more than a machine, and AI will take over one day when it's smarter than us. So the future of humanity is in these robotic AI machines that are headed towards artificial general intelligence and then artificial super intelligence. And then we have the golden age of Ahriman.
Right. Okay, so one thing that occurred to me as you were speaking then, and especially going back to the garden, when you mentioned the Garden of Eden, it's you said Lucifer was allowed into the garden. So there's a presumption there, a presupposition that some higher intelligence, even higher than than the garden itself,
Good question.
allowed Lucifer into the garden, and then so are we to assume that something or someone is allowing Ahriman's work in the world? I just want to take a short break from this conversation to let you know about a video I've created called Facing the Future with Inner Calm. And it's really for those people who want to know a little bit more about Rudolf Steiner and his work, and just why it's so relevant in today's world and in the world that's coming towards us out of the future. So you can actually join up to receive that video by clicking on the link in the description below. And then you'll also receive my newsletter, and you'll also be able to have access to the Spiritual Scientist online community. And so that's a place where we can discuss these things further and explore them even more deeply, meet like-minded people, and also there'll be regular videos in there, short courses, and also live sessions on Zoom and things like that you can have access to. So just click on the link in the description below and look forward to seeing you over there. And now back to the conversation.
So this may sound like, where's he coming from? But I'm going to take us on a little bit of a journey into what Steiner called occult science. And I'm going to start out by saying there is a field in astrophysics called metallicity. They ask the question, how is it out of the Big Bang that the world that we experience has heavy metals? And they answer that by saying, in the 14 billion years or so since the Big Bang, there have been 3 prior solar systems. And each one of those ended in a supernova. And in that supernova, after the first one, the hydrogen and helium were fused together to give us the gases. And then in the second one, the second supernova, the fusion led to, in the third solar system, that which could bring about a watery world and things that could dissolve into a liquid, sorry, not water, but liquid world. And now we can come to the fourth incarnation of a solar system, which is where we are today, where we have solids and heavy metals. Okay, now Steiner offers a picture, interestingly, that's quite similar. And that first one, which we would say today was just hydrogen and helium, and then hydrogen becoming helium when it completed, would have been a universe or a solar system full of warmth, but not warmth as we see it, vibrating molecules, but a warmth that does not need matter. And that would have been what they call old Saturn, and there would have been spiritual beings at the human stage. Those spiritual beings in Dionysus, the Pagates picture of this, they would be at the level called the curiosities today. I mean, sorry, at the level of the archive today, and their administrators would have been the thrones at that time. Then we come to the next one, which has the name Old Sun, curiosities, the administrators, and the beings at the archangel level would have been at the human stage then. Now we come to Old Moon, and the beings called the dynamis would be the administrators, and the beings at the human stage would be the angels. Then we come to ours. The next lower of the higher beings is called the Elohim, or in Greek, the Exousiai, and now we're at the human stage. So if we go back to Old Moon, there was a class of beings that didn't finish evolution. Those are the Luciferic beings. If we go back to Old Sun, class of beings that didn't finish evolution, they're called the Ahrimanic beings. And their administrators, respectively, the dynamis and the curiosities, want all of their beings to, they care for them. They want them all to finish. So the dynamis allow for the creation of the Elohim, which is a creation out of what the dynamis had formed, which was out of what the curiosities had formed. And form isn't quite the right word. Maybe create is a better word. So these all exist one within the other, so to speak. So for the dynamis, it's very plausible that they could have allowed Lucifer, who would have been in being at the level of an Elohim, but a retarded or a laggard being compared to those who were responsible, the administrators. And then we have Ahriman, same thing, but he's coming from a previous one. He would also be at that level of the Elohim, but functioning at the next lower level, that of the archive. But he is a very high being, very important being. And so the higher beings want all of these beings to be redeemed, if you will. And so Lucifer's redemption begins on Golgotha. As you know, there were 3 on Golgotha, Christ in the middle, and on one side, Lucifer, and Christ says to him, representative of Lucifer, and Christ says to him, this day you will be able to be with me in paradise. But to the other one that's continuing to mock Christ, it takes longer. It won't be during Earth evolution, the redemption of Ahriman. It'll be in Jupiter. So, and there are beings who are known as the White Brotherhood, and one in particular, Mani, M-A-N-I, or sometimes spelled M-A-N-E-S or M-A-N-U, who has volunteered the role to take on this redemption of Ahriman from the human perspective. So this gets into a lot of other stuff. I don't know if we want to go there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. Some of that, I guess, if people aren't familiar with some of the terms that you're using,
Right.
they maybe need to sort of have a chart in front of them. Actually, I'm talking about myself. I need a chart in front of me. that was me trying a little trick I was playing with myself there. No, I need to see a chart so I
Right.
can see which being you're talking about in which hierarchy and which role they have, so that I can follow it. Other people may wish to do that as well. Maybe we can have a link in the description for something like that as well, Andrew, because I think you actually have some charts and
I
things
have
like that.
made some pictures. It might, but when you take what is 3D or 4D and squish it down to 2D, it can remain a little bit complicated. But for your listeners, if you think of a sphere, or better yet, those Russian dolls, when you open it, there's another doll inside. You open that, there's another doll inside. You open that, there's another doll inside. Well, think of these um, like those dolls or like spheres where there's one inside each of the other. And this would be the fourth doll or the fourth sphere. And as we are progressing inwardly, we're becoming more and more dense, or the world that we experience, I should say, not we, but the world we experience is becoming more and more dense. And each one, there's some change to the body that is used by the being on the human level. So the human level has gone archangel, angel, and now human. And then the administrators have gone, I just got a cramp, thrones, Kyriates, dynamis, and now exousiai, or Elohim, that we find in Genesis. So I hope that review helps a little bit getting the picture, but I know not everyone gets it. It's still tough. But it's interesting that in Christianity, we do have, it's been kind of whitewashed out. But, when some of the Christmas carols talk about the heavenly hosts, plural, and we do know about in early Christianity this 9 levels, and we do talk about um, different levels of heaven. We talk about cloud levels or heavenly levels, and I'm on cloud 9 or I'm on cloud 7. And, these are referring to what was once well known in Christianity, well known, shall we say, theoretically. But if we go way back pre-Christian, then people actually knew of these beings. So
That's important, and I think also what came to mind was even in Genesis, you have, yeah, that word Elohim, and that's plural. This
yes, right.
the creation mentions the being, but it's actually plural beings who create the world.
Right.
So
The singular for in Hebrew is Eloha.
okay, that's
And
good to know.
Elohim is
Yeah.
plural. Right.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, good. I was right about that then. I like it when I get it right, especially if we're recording. um,
Right.
so maybe we could move into actually talking about this concept of incarnation. And I just also just want to point out that I think sometimes again with people who are more in the traditional Christianity side of things, it's like, I sort of said this before, but these beings are evil, and that's it. They're evil, and evil's bad, and let's do away with it. But actually, them having a role to play doesn't make evil good. It doesn't mean bad is now good or anything like that. It's just that the power of the evil, it's like, one way I've put it to people sometimes is, if you didn't have evil, you wouldn't be able to have good, because you need its opposite in order for it to become more good.
Right.
If you know what I mean. But anyway, maybe
Yeah.
moving into talking about actually the incarnation of these beings, because this, I mean, personally find a little bit terrifying as well. Um, but how can we understand that? How do we deal with it? What does it mean?
Right. Um, so just to mention what you were also starting to say, throughout Christianity, various theologians have tried to take up the question of evil, and many of them have come to the conclusion that evil is actually a necessary thing. So this term necessary evil has existed in Christian theology as well as other theologies. Um, and we will, in this conference, most likely, although there's 17 different speakers, so there'll be 18 different views. But you know, uh, this question of what do we do about this incarnation? And there are some voices that are saying, let's find all the protections we can. Okay, that's one approach. Another is, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. It's beyond my pay grade to do anything. So I'm just going to sort of sit back and let it happen, or maybe hope I'm dead and gone before it happens and I don't have to go through whatever it's going to bring. And then there's another group that would say, we need to prepare for this. We need to get as many humans so prepared that when this being Ahriman incarnates, and I'm assuming, I'm making the assumption it's still coming. Some would like to say it's already happened, and that's why things are so horrible. He's here now, or he's already been here. Um, we can talk about that in a minute, but so we get this other end, which is, okay, this is a challenge, and we need to have preparers to prepare the preparers, so to speak. That there's a whole sequence of work that needs to be done so that human evolution after Ahriman's incarnation can survive and progress to where it needs to progress. And that gets into some assumptions that can sound quite arrogant, even. You know, how do you know what is supposed to happen, Mr. Linnell, um, if you're proposing to be a preparer for this future? And for this, I lean on my Christian training in the background, but also what Rudolf Steiner gave us. And I do see this evolution process that we began in that discussion, this U-shaped evolution, as an important part, and that in the future, the time for which we have been granted to be in the physical will come to an end. And why are we in the physical? Well, that begs the question, what is it about the physical that we can gain? What are the fruits we can return to the spiritual world from the physical world? And in the spiritual world, if Steiner's right, beings interpenetrate each other. There is no, this is my space, you know. And you know the feeling when you're standing in a crowd, you feel crowded because most people feel they need a space around them. And in a way, this is correct for a number of reasons. But if I just take one of many reasons, one is when I exhale, I'm exhaling parts of my body. What were parts of my body? The moisture I exhale was once, in my body, and that moisture has been moved in through my lungs into the air that I'm going to exhale. So I inhale dry air or whatever the humidity is outside, but you know this in the wintertime, that if you're wearing a scarf, the scarf becomes full of ice crystals because we're exhaling moisture. That moisture is permeated by our morality. So when you're standing close to other people, you're inhaling their moisture containing their morality. It's not just bad breath. We do feel this, that I'm often too close to another person. I'm in their presence. And this is why we're having this struggle going on today. Should our meetings be in-person meetings or can they be online meetings? And that's one of the things we miss when we have online versus in person is breathing each other's morality, good or bad. Yeah. So you'll have to remind me where I was. I kind of talked myself into a tangent there.
No,
I think we were
no,
talking
that's
about the
good.
conference, right?
Well, I haven't heard it put that way before about breathing each other's morality. That's quite a picture. Um, we were talking about the incarnation. What does
Oh
that
yeah,
mean, and what does that mean, and what do we do? Um, could I just pick up on one thing you said
sure.
that in the future have um, we won't be material, or the
Right.
time of incarnating into the material world's coming to an end. Um, I could have this wrong. This is just a thought that occurs to me. Is but we're also partly here to actually transform matter itself, aren't we? In a way, and transform it in a sense, spiritualize it. So that being the case, what is it that we're actually transcending if we no longer are incarnating into matter? Maybe that's going too far in a different direction. I
This
don't
is
know.
a this gets to be a very broad and difficult question. And yes, by the time Earth, our human part of Earth evolution is done, we have the job of being the cosmic janitors to dissolve the Earth. And then we go into this cosmic, the Hindu word is pralaya or sleep, before the fifth solar system can be formed. Um, now, so that's a good, but that's far out there. When I drew that U shape, we are descending from Eden. We are not yet physical beings until we get to an earlier epic called the Lemurian epic. Then we go into the Atlantean, which is sort of this bottom part. And then we're now in this fifth epic. So during the Lemurian, became, we started taking in physical substance. So at first it was airy substance. So we were fire breathing dragons, so to speak, at one point, and that we were air beings. And in part because the watery and physical density of the earth was still forming, still, and all of this was full of life. So what is rock today was once living substance. It can't be living substance today. It has to have transitioned into this lifeless substance that we can stand on. And that standing on the earth is a very important picture because we stand differently than the animals on the solid earth. We're the only beings that stand upright. And this uprightness is a very important gesture that we have. Um, in, in the Ahrimanic view, Ahriman says you can make a heaven on earth. It might be just a heaven for you, but you can bring about the thought that it'll be a heaven for everyone here on earth. And I think the vast majority of people on earth believe that. When Steiner talked about the threefold social order or social threefolding, he never said this will be a utopia. He said this will be always full of challenges, but we can meet the challenges better this way. We can do it in a humane way that furthers human evolution. Now, in this this ending will happen. Steiner actually gave a date of about 5,700. That's not so far away. That might be 3 incarnations, maybe 4 if things are speeding up enough, which is another reason why working on our karma with each incarnation is really important because you don't have many chances left to get that all worked out. But that's another topic for another time. But this, so how does he say that's going to come to an end? And he said, already, and this was back in the 1920s, he said, human fertilization is under stress. We don't have the same number of kids we used to have. And I've got my family history in a book right here. And I look back just 200 years, and my ancestors were having 12, 14 kids. Today, maybe half of them are having 2 kids, and half of them are having none. So we're under 2 kids per woman today, which is below 0 population growth in the West, and not every country in the West, but much of the West is that way. And as we go forward, sexual procreation become more and more difficult from what we're doing environmentally on the one hand, and it doesn't look like it, but if you look at where sexual procreation is creating lots of kids still, these are in places mental impact hasn't been so strong, but also materialism hasn't been so strong. Now, but Steiner also points out that we are beings, and this is in the New Testament. St. Paul writes, we are body, soul, and spirit. And the terms are pneuma, psyche, and soma. And so the body and soul have a mutual relationship that begins at conception or day 17 or so and continues throughout one's life up to a certain age. And that age when they now evolve on their own has been getting younger and younger. And if we go back to like 6,000 BCE, that went up to about the age of 70. And every 350 years, it's been dropping by 1 year. So we're now at age 27. When we get to that year 5,700, it will be 14, which means the soul can no longer bring the body to puberty. We will no longer have sexual maturation. So we will find other ways to create bodies. But here, we start leaning on things that science has already discovered. For example, Mick, you can make out of your skin cells, you can make a female egg. And out of a female skin cell, you can make male sperm. And it's through a process of going through, turning it into stem cells and bringing it forward. And our current medical ethics say, don't ever combine those two. We don't want to find out what that'll do yet. But you know somebody's going to do it, if not already done secretively. And I suspect things like this will eventually lead to those bodies of the future. But we were already growing human organs, kidneys, livers in pigs for human replacement. So we're trying to farm animals, especially pigs, to grow replacement organs for us. So you need a new kidney? Okay. Moe's farm down the road there. We'll go get one tonight and we'll do the surgery tomorrow. These things are happening already. So we're becoming what? More animal, perhaps? We know from organ replacement with human organs that the recipient has memories that come not from their life. We already know this. So if you get an organ that, even though it's a human organ out of genetics placed into a pig to be grown, are you receiving the pig's memory? And what does that do to your sense of humanity? Does it animalize it, if I can say that? So this future will be becoming more and more Ahrimanic. And we also see elbow replacement, knee replacement, hip replacement with mechanical parts. You're wearing eyeglasses. You've got earbuds in. I need hearing aids. I know friends who've got pacemakers. More and more of this will be happening. Some are on dialysis machines. So this Ahrimanization of the body is taking place. And I suspect when Ahriman incarnates, it will be at a time when the brain-computer interface has been perfected, so that you can context switch in your mind and either move through the brain-computer interface and go to your super AI companion for whatever you need from that, or you can use your human intelligence for, your personal relationships.
Okay, so yeah, that's kind of terrifying. The idea that we can
No,
be able to
terrifying.
maybe that's just me. You're looking forward to it, obviously, Andrew.
No,
um,
no,
no, no,
forward to it.
no,
Not at all. No, don't get me wrong.
no, only joking.
But what I think is important to get here is a time is coming which we can call the golden age of transhumanism, when this will be realized because human sexual procreation will have come to an end. Conditions in the earth will be so severe that we will find that we need these mechanical bodies in order to be on the earth. And others of humanity, and this will begin around the year 4900, so right before this, will be the time of the Maitreya Buddha, which is the time of the opening of the doors for ascension, meaning that a human being who has developed their consciousness into their etheric body, where it is already, in a sense, but we entrap our etheric body. Well, I can't say we entrap it. Evolution has placed it deeply in the physical body. And right now, this etheric body can be loosening, and it loosens through meditation. It loosens through doing eurythmy. It loosens even through singing. And in that loosened etheric body, if we can become conscious of something more than our physical thinking, we can start developing a expanded consciousness. Then eventually humanity will reach the point where we recognize, oh, I have this expanded consciousness in my body of life, in my etheric body. And I also have this dead thinking, which is akin to artificial intelligence. I can lift myself out of my physical body into my etheric body. Not today. I can a little bit in meditation, but eventually I'll be able to do that commonly, shall we say. And at some point, then I can say, I'm leaving the physical behind. I'm entering the spiritual world. And I can do this because I've settled all my karma, all the things I need to do in earthly life are done, and I can become a greater helper for those who I leave behind. Out of my love for them, out of my agape love for those I leave behind, I will voluntarily enter the etheric realm and now work from there upon humanity. That will happen from around the year 4900 going forward. And I think Steiner said about a third of humanity, and I don't know if it means, population wise, a third, but a group, humanity will split into three. There will be the group that can ascend, a second group that will later ascend, but will continue on with humanity, and a third group that will never be able to ascend, and thus will have to go through what Steiner called the second fall. And that is once the Ahrimanic double that we all have in us has successfully conquered the earth and has covered the earth with a web like a spider's web, and the earth will then die. That's all part of our future. This is why, oh my God, Andrew, this is a terrible, horrible future. But is it? It fits perfectly with this human evolution. Otherwise, we stay married to the physical realm. We have to be able to progress. And we have the freedom now to choose whether to progress or to regress.
Is
Sorry, yeah, that was long.
no, that was great. If what you've just said, is that connected with a lot of people in the more, you might say, new age movement, talk about becoming 5D and ascending, and I always get a little bit of a cold shiver down my spine when I hear it, because it sounds similar to what you're saying in a way,
Right.
but there must be a difference.
Yeah, I would say that in all these things, thinking no longer is confined within my skull. My thoughts, because they're part in, or they're being written into the etheric body, these are perceptible by anyone. They're out there. And many people have the experience. Let's say you're sitting at a round table with other people and you're discussing something, you're trying to understand and reach a conclusion about something, and you get this thought and you're waiting while somebody else is talking to bring that thought. It feels just right, just important. But before you get to, somebody across the table offers exactly the same thought. And what I'm trying to say, and we also have historically people actually racing to the patent office to submit their patents, and they're identical patents, totally independent. and one gets there first and the other doesn't, and that person became famous, and the other became poor and whatever, you know. Throughout history, these things have happened. Our thinking is not confined to our brain. And Rupert Sheldrake, I don't know if you know the name, he's a Brit like you, and
No, no,
he's
no, sorry, I'm not a Brit. I'm an Aussie.
okay, right.
Just had to.
I'm sorry.
Just to, I'll
That's
get
a
in. No, I'll get in trouble.
ding.
I'll get it. I'll get in trouble.
Right, right. So, but Rupert Sheldrake has done a lot of studies, and of course, it's ostracized him from much of the scientific community. But I think he's done very important work in this regards. So, uh, the New Age has picked up on this. They don't have the same terminology or the spiritual science to back it, but they have their own terminology of consciousness and multidimensional consciousness and so on, as you say. So um, yeah, there's a lot of similarities, and I think it's because the thoughts are out there. They don't belong only to anthroposophists.
Sure, yeah, and that's not really what I was suggesting. I think maybe the difference is that they're saying they're doing that right now, and they're saying things like, "We need to forget about the Earth. You know, it's over. We're ascending. Everybody else that's not ascending, just
Oh,
they'll be
so
okay. But
remember
we're
we talked
ascending, so
right, we talked about Lucifer and Ahriman, and one of the balances we need for Ahriman in our world today is Lucifer, and that we don't need the earth anymore. We're going to get out of here. Where are they going? They're going right into Lucifer's kingdom. That is a Luciferic calling. To ascend too early is very much like what happened around the year 666 with the great academies called Gandhi Shapur around Baghdad. And this continued up until the time that the Mongols came and destroyed Baghdad. So from roughly around the year 500, when Justinian closed all the mystery centers and its teachers moved into that area around Baghdad where all these schools were, culture there became the center of worldly culture from about the 5th century to the 12th century when it was finally overthrown. And so Charlemagne sends his envoys to Baghdad and he brings back these 12 teachers to start French education and the schools, and that brings about the whole idea of education throughout Europe. Europe looks at the French model, and they start developing schools for everyone. At beginning, it was just for the monks. Only a monk was deemed eligible and worthy of such esoteric, if you will, but wisdom came from God. So you couldn't even read a Bible. No Bibles were available in the Christian world. Only the priests and the monks could read the Bible. The rest were deemed, they were too beneath this. They would muddy the waters, so to speak. So yeah, and that was a new idea brought over from Baghdad by Charlemagne. Let's educate our people.
right, right.
And of course, it was Ahrimanic education eventually.
Okay, yeah. Another thing that occurred to me while you're speaking is that what I've read about as well is Ahriman having certain effects. So, we tend to think of him as this being that wants to sort of drag us down, fetter us to the earth, uh, inspire us with thoughts that matter is all there is and the spirit
Right.
doesn't exist and we're just material bodies and consciousness is just emergent and all those things. Um, but something I read or someone said something to me about that he also wants to develop or help or give human beings a kind of clairvoyance
Right.
as well. Is that right? Can you say
Right.
something to that?
Yes, Ahriman wants us to use something material to have our spiritual experiences. So ayahuasca, LSD, hallucinogenics, and we find researchers today are trying to rewrite this history of the mystery centers and saying, oh, they sat on, psychedelic fumes that were coming up from the earth, or they were taking pills or something. There's no belief, and of course, I use the word belief, that these ancient people could arrive at their spiritual perspectives, their spiritual views just on their own internal. They had to have had something material. That's Ahriman speaking there. And Ahriman will enable humans to have these wonderful spiritual experiences with some material, a mushroom or something. And and then what you would experience will be something spiritual, but your own soul will be coloring that picture. So what in a way, if you remember uh, coloring books, it'll be like that the spiritual experience will be a black and white coloring book, and you'll fill in the colors and you'll think you made a wonderful painting. Can you be an artist after that? No. It's a coloring book that
So,
Ahriman will be giving us.
okay, yeah, so that's a little bit like Steiner warns in a way that our initial spiritual experiences when we take up a spiritual practice will generally be not true objective spiritual
Correct.
experiences, but rather a reflection of what's really going on within our own souls, but projected outwards. And we think it's a real objective spiritual experience that other people could share, but it's not. It's actually really just, yeah, what's going on within us.
Right. Right. And so what it does is prevents us from creating a spiritual science. And by a spiritual science, what I'm getting at in natural science, we claim it has to be measurable, weighable, uh, or uh, numbers. And in the if you can think of how might those be transformed in the spiritual world, it becomes something that is repeatable. But even repeatable today means it doesn't matter what time of the day, what time of the year. And so repeatability also becomes a difficult word for a spiritual science to develop. Because obviously, if I'm looking at my shadow at 7 o'clock in the morning versus my shadow at 12 o'clock noon, it's a very different sized shadow.
Okay, good analogy. I like that. Um, Andrew, another question just occurred to me from what you were saying before. I think this is important. I know I keep jumping back, but
That's all
um,
right.
you said about, the time will come when we leave the earthly body behind and ascend, um, in a sense. How does that connect with the resurrection? Because
Oh, yeah.
Christ takes on the human body, takes on a human, becomes a human being. The God becomes a human being, and then not only just takes on a body, but actually goes through a process, goes through the suffering, the torture, the worst things, the humiliation that a human being can go through. And Steiner talks about how, that some people of a more maybe Gnostic persuasion will say, well, he didn't really suffer because he was a god. But Steiner says it's the opposite to that. He suffered more because a god had never become flesh before.
Right.
And then just wondering, how does this connect with, if we're leaving the body behind, how does that connect with the resurrection and the resurrection body, as it were?
Right. Yeah. Excellent question. And Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And then he says to his disciples, "Follow me." What does this "follow me" mean? And like you said, he became fully a human being just as we approach Golgotha, and goes through all of the events of the passion um, as a human being and as the Christ. So he's the first God to experience death as a human being, and is able to, through that experience, remember, all these beings interpenetrate, give that knowledge of death to all of the gods. Now, so in Follow Me with Ascension, we are coming to the point where this body we have actually may not be born or die anymore. Remember, sexual procreation comes to an end, and we continue for another 2,160 years plus. And during that period of time, ascension will still be an option. And yet, what are we leaving behind but a body that is highly mechanized, may not be going through birth or death, but that we consciously leave it behind. So in a way, it's a kind of death. The people earlier in what's called the sixth post-Atlantean cultural age, which starts around the year 3500 and goes to about the year 5700, are going to, that first third of humanity will be able to do something more like what Christ did. That the body they leave behind will die then when they leave it behind. And again, they are following Christ's lead, who said, "Follow me." And that even means through a conscious experience of death. So how they die, that's up to them, I guess. But, I don't think all those who die will be going through some kind of torture like Jesus Christ did on Golgotha. But who knows? Peter was crucified upside down.
Yeah, most of the disciples met that a difficult end.
A difficult death. Interesting, isn't it?
There's a distinction in there as well, which I don't fully understand, but the difference between the material body, or the corporeal body,
Right.
the body of matter, and the physical body. Steiner makes a distinction, doesn't he, between those two, and that what rose on Easter Sunday was a transformed, in a sense, or the original
Right.
physical
And
body.
if
But
we,
maybe this is going.
no, this is good. And I'm sure it'll help many of the listeners. If we go back to that very first solar system we called Old Saturn, where it was just warmth, something of what we have as a physical body goes all the way back there. And so something in us is still connected to Old Saturn. And what Steiner calls that is the phantom body. It has no matter, but it is that of the physical body that went through Old Saturn, Old Sun, Old Moon, and is now here, that you might say the physical body forms around it. And
Okay,
when
yeah, sorry to cut you off. I don't want to say too much here to cut you off much, but it's just to say that this word phantom, I think, I'm not sure
yeah,
if maybe it sounds better in German or sounds different in German, but the
yes,
English,
correct.
it's
It's a terrible word for
not a great
English.
word for English. Yeah, but anyway,
Right.
let's just continue on,
Right.
please.
So thank you for saying that. Right. So we have something, and let's call it the the concept that the Elohim or Exousiai had for the human being, in terms of what would be necessary for us to develop an I am. And so this has gone through all those prior stages and is now there at the core, or you might say within all of our physical body. It's hard to think of it spatially because it also doesn't conform to spatial, which are 3 or 4 or 5 dimensions. So when the resurrection of Christ happened, as you were kind of indicating, something of the mineral quality of the body, the lifeless part, fell away. There's a gentleman in Norway, R.A. Torresen, who speaks about how the illusion of the physical, actually, its reality is in elemental beings. And whatever is physical has in its reality an elemental being. And so the physicality of our physical body, once you take away the mineral, what's left is an elemental body. Are these elementals that are cooperating. So they are, in a sense, abiding by the word of this logos of the body, this phantom. And that when you ascend as Christ resurrected, you take the phantom and leave behind the mineral kingdom. You give that back to the earth.
Okay.
So the problem I have is how does one who in this from 4900 or whenever till we start the 7th cultural age, when the body's become mechanized after sexual procreation, there's a period of time there when ascension is occurring. And I'm under the impression, although I can't prove this or say, I shouldn't say much, but where the body does go through death because it's a body of life like we have, where blood is flowing in it and we're breathing air and we have our physical senses active. I think that body, those original people will be going through a follow me, meaning they'll go through their own Golgotha.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot, but yeah, that's and when we ask, what does the incarnation of Ahriman have to do with that? Well, it does, in that it leads us, just as artificial intelligence will lead us to see what is, I should do it this way, what is dead thinking, which AI can only do. It works with dead data on dead thoughts, which we also use and do in our sort of everyday thinking. It then can allow us to see what living thinking is. And this is something we have to develop in our time, or if we never develop that living thinking, then our choice out of that is to sink further into materialism. Our concepts are bound by materialism. And so as we get closer to this incarnation of Ahriman, those thoughts become more enmeshed into materialism.
So, in a sense, in one aspect of the purpose of this incarnation of this being, which you believe has not happened yet, some people do, is to help us differentiate between living human thinking, true thinking, and the dead thoughts, the dead thinking that
Mhm.
is not fully human, would you say?
Right. Yep, I would say that's correct. I mean, there's all of these thinking, feeling, and willing. So it's a real soul battle to make the soul strong. But thinking has to become living. In the feeling, you have to develop this love for the individual, for any individual. I think this is what agape in John 21, when Christ asks Peter, "Do you love me?" This is the word agape he uses. And Peter answers, "Lord, you know everything. Why are you asking me this stupid question? You know, I philia you." That's the word in philosophy, the love of Sophia. Philia is a devotional love, a love that you have for a guru. But agape is what has to develop now in this new stage of Christianity since the reappearance of Christ in the etheric has begun. We now can attain to this agape love. So the early church of Peter was a church of filial love. Now we develop the new Christianity, and if you call it a church, it's the church of agape love.
That's a good point, because in the English translation, most English translations of that passage in the Gospels, it's not clear that there are different words. It's just love.
It's
Just translate. They're
just
all translated as love. So
right,
that's
right. And of course, this whole question of love is something Ahriman just can't understand. What are you talking about? You're so stupid. Talking about love? There's no such thing as love. It's all something you've invented, It's imaginary.
or it's chemical reactions
Yeah, it's
and
chemical reactions, right?
yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to finish up. But just I did want to ask just one question. It doesn't need it. You don't have to say too much if you're getting tired now as well. But you hinted at it. But what do we do about this?
Right. Yeah, this is this organization that I helped to found, MysTech, has gone through much of the archives of Steiner looking for indications. And whenever we are loosening this etheric, so various forms of meditation, that we can become conscious of the etheric, these are all counterbalances. So one of the most important of those is eurythmy. And I can point to eurythmy for lots of things, but the main one is this awakened consciousness. As a eurythmist, you've got to develop this consciousness of how is the etheric working in on me? What does it mean to be gesturing what an O or an ah or a ba is? These are all out of the etheric. And so you are becoming conscious in the etheric doing eurythmy. That's a very important thing. And there's lots of other little things. I suggest that people get out and move, take a walk, do an hour walk for every 4 hours you sit in front of a computer screen. And you're not wearing headphones and listening to lectures or music or something. You're listening to nature. So find a quiet park or woods or something, conservation land. Then something he didn't have a chance to develop. And we talked a little about breathing being a very important part of our physical existence. What does it mean to breathe the etheric? As we breathe air, what would we be breathing in the etheric? And Steiner called this refined breathing, a breathing of the etheric. And he said, actually, we already are. Through those five senses, we already, but we don't know it, inhale the four ethers. And the warmth ether, in its old Saturn qualities, carries the other three. It carries the light ether to our thinking, it carries the chemical ether to our feeling, and it carries the life ether to our willing. And this has to be developed and will be developed, hopefully, so that every street corner in the world, instead of a yoga studio, will have a refined breathing yoga studio. Then it will create that necessary counterbalance. We're nowhere near there yet. And I've looked at this, but I haven't been able to anywhere yet, to be honest, with how to develop this into a real yoga. There's a guy named Yeshua Ben Ahriman in Israel. He put out a book called Cognitive Yoga, where he's trying to address this, and helpful what he's brought forth. So,
Okay, very interesting. I always mention to people
yeah,
Steiner's 6 exercises. I don't know if I think it's heading in that direction where we take control ourselves of our own thinking. We develop a healthy, balanced feeling life and strengthen our will and other things. But just how important those things are alongside a meditation path, that we stay grounded and able to think logically and clearly and able to relate to one another.
You're absolutely right, Mick. That those are important for the facing of Ahriman. Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, Andrew, a huge thank you to you for coming on to the podcast once again.
One last
Oh, sorry, you
picture I
got
want
another?
to
Yeah, please do.
and it's a wonderful picture. Oh, geez, all of a sudden I forgot the artist. Come on, Andrew. It's a picture of Saint Michael as the archangel. In the background is a castle and war going on. And in the foreground is Michael standing on Ahriman as the dragon. And he's got a sword in his hand, but he never slays the dragon. That's St. George that slays the dragon. But Ahriman can't and shouldn't be killed. But the question Steiner asks in the leading thoughts, where he doesn't ask, he says that Michael asks this question. Michael says, I can stand on Ahriman, even though Ahriman's a higher being than me. Will humanity reach the point of being able to stand on Ahriman? And if you look at and I'm going to go get it and close this. This here, which is called the representative of man, you see Ahriman here before the activity of Christ in the human. So when the human says, Christ in me, then we get Lucifer moved into this realm, and Ahriman moved into this realm where we're standing on Ahriman. And that is the picture of where we need to be when we face this incarnation of Ahriman in the future. So thank you for this time and sharing all of that. And I hope those listening will want to come to our conference. And MysTech.org is where you can go to find out more information.
Great. Well, yeah, I'll have all the links in the description underneath the video and on the podcast description and everything as well, Andrew, so that people can find that the links to attend the online conference, which is taking place 7th to the 10th of August, 2025. People might be watching this video now in the year 5700. So I don't know, let's we don't know, do we? But yes, Andrew, big thank you to you for giving us your time today. These conversations, we went in lots of, there was a lot in there today. So I would just say to people, if it's too overwhelming, just take one little chunk at a time. Even better, go back and look at Steiner's lectures on the topics. maybe even better than that, go and read, if you haven't already. I don't want to be sound like I'm talking down to people, but go and read some of the actual books. Sort of just want to point that out to people. And I keep having this conversation with people, but his work can be so overwhelming because there's so much of it available, especially online now. But just to take it in small chunks, find one book, work with one chapter of that one book or one part of one lecture, and live with it for a while.
And Mick, I have another suggestion too for people, which is um, this organization, MysTech, has done a lot of that work for you by putting together a sort of textbook or study guidebook. And there's now 9 of them. You can find them, and what they've done is taken excerpts from the lectures, but they have a pointer back to the full lecture if you want to read it. But the important things for that topic, so there's what's going to happen to the human body, the mysteries of evil, this refined breathing that we talked about, light and electricity, and so forth. There's a lot of books here that, if you want to just deeply dive into what Steiner said on a topic, they've already been coagulated for you.
That's wonderful. I think, yeah, even for and for people like us who've been reading this stuff for a long time, it's always very good and helpful to go back to so-called basics as well. I find I have to do that again and again.
Right.
So Andrew,
Well,
thank you very much once again. As I say, all Andrew's links to his work and website and information about the conference will be in the description below. And just to say a big thank you. And also, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so on Substack. There'll also be links below to my links if you want to help support this show to continue. And we've got some courses and things coming up as well, so you can find out all about that. But yeah, thank you again, Andrew, and all the best.
right. I know.
Talk to you soon. Bye now.